This is the Truth to Live By podcast, a ministry of Windward Baptist Church. In this podcast, you will hear the verse-by-verse teaching and preaching of Pastor Kevin Akana. Learn more about our church from our website at windwardbaptist.org.
As I was mentioning in the study of 2 Kings, we see that this is a divided kingdom. The kingdom was divided after the reign of Solomon, and the king Rehoboam took over, which is King David's grandson. He ruled the southern kingdom. Now remember, the southern kingdom, which had only two tribes, which was Judah and also the tribe of Benjamin. And then the 10 northern tribes, they had no good kings at all. The southern kingdom had a few good kings. The southern kingdom is the heart of the kingdom, because that's where Jerusalem is in the south. That's the capital of the southern kingdom, whereas Samaria is a capital of the northern kingdom. And the kings in the south are the ones that are of the Davidic lineage. They're related to King David. But the ones in the north are just whoever. There's a few of them that had somewhat of a dynasty. We see that here, a little bit of it, the dynasty of Jehu. And he had some of his children that were kings. So 2 Kings chapter 13, we see embracing bondage. You know, Christianity, when you become a Christian, what happens is we are delivered from bondage. And sin binds you. You know, when you're living in sin, you live in bondage. And bondage is not enjoyable. And it could be someone is in jail, incarcerated. That's good. That's bondage. And it also could just be that someone is in bondage to addiction. You know, it could be someone is in bondage to a particular habit. Or someone could be in financial bondage. Someone could be just living a life of depression, whereas they are just don't even want to go outside their home, and so they're bound to that area. So bondage could take on a lot of different forms, but whatever form it takes on, it's not fun. It's never fun to be in bondage. But the reason why we're in bondage is because of sin. Sin binds us. So the thing is, why would we want to embrace bondage? Why wouldn't we want to just go 100% for freedom? And the Bible says, and Jesus said it himself, the truth shall make you free. It doesn't even just set you free. It makes you free. When I see this chapter, that's the topic that I see here, is the embracing of bondage by these kings. 2 Kings chapter 13. It says, in the 23rd year of Joash, the son of Ahaziah, king of Judah, Jehoahaz, the son of Jehu, began to reign over Israel in Samaria and reigned 17 years. So Judah, the southern kingdom. So it talks about the southern king, that this northern king reigned during the reign of this southern king. The southern king of Judah was Ahaziah. And so the king of Israel, and remember the northern kingdom was called Israel, and the southern kingdom was called Judah. So after the divided kingdom, when it talks about Israel, it could be just referring to the northern tribe. And when it's talking about Judah, it could be referring to the southern tribes. Before the divided kingdom, it would be talking about the particular tribe. But after the division, it's talking about the southern kingdom itself, when it says Judah. So it's good to note that. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, and followed the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which made Israel to sin. And when Rehoboam became king after Solomon, the 10 northern tribes, they rebelled. And so The king of the southern kingdom was Rehoboam, Solomon's son, King David's grandson. And the king of the north was Jeroboam. So they have similar names. Rehoboam in the south, Jeroboam in the north. So Jeroboam was the one that got them to sin originally because he built the golden calves in the southernmost area of the northern kingdom and in the northern area. So the north and the south, they had these golden calves that they could go to worship. He did not want them to go all the way to Jerusalem because he felt like if they did that, he's going to lose all his people. They're going to go back to where they originated from. He didn't want, so politically, he did it for political reasons. In having them worship these golden calves, so they didn't have to go to Jerusalem to worship. But obviously, it became a major problem because Israel was only supposed to worship at the temple. You can't just have your own way of worship. It has to be done God's way. So when it says that this king, he followed after, and you'll see that when you're reading the book of 2 Kings over and over and over again, that this king did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, as did Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which caused Israel to sin. Caused Israel to sin in that he built these golden calves. He erected these golden calves. So verse 2, and he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, and followed the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which made Israel to sin. He departed not from them therefrom. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he delivered them into the hand of Hazael, king of Syria, and into the hand of Ben-Hadad, the son of Hazael, all their days. So he did evil. He led the nation in doing that which was evil, and as a result, they were in bondage. And that follows the same pattern of the book of Judges. If you study the book of Judges, that's the pattern that Israel went in. It's a cycle. It's a circle. That Israel was doing good. They were serving the Lord. And then they started to embrace wickedness. They departed from the ways of the Lord. They started to do their own things and worship false gods. And as a result, God raised up their enemies, and the enemies were raised up against them and put them into bondage. And they were in bondage, and they didn't like being in bondage. So then they cried out to God for deliverance. And then God raised up a judge. And then the judge, a military leader, would deliver them against the enemies. And then they were free again. And then they served the Lord again. And then after a while, they did the same thing. And it just kept going in circles. It just kept going in circles. But every time that the circle went to the next time, the enemies were stronger and more fierce. The bondage that they were in was longer, and it was worse. It was more difficult bondage. So that's what happens. And people will do that all their life. They'll live in bondage, and then they'll get right with God. They'll start coming to church. They'll start reading their Bible. They'll start praying. They'll start doing the things that they did when they first got saved. And then they'll experience some type of freedom, and they'll enjoy it. They'll do well for a while, and then they'll go back again into the ways of the world, and then they'll be in bondage again. And then they'll get right with God again. And it just they keep doing the same thing over and over again. But each time, what happened? Same thing. The bondage ends up being more difficult. It becomes harder to get out of it, and it holds them in it longer. And every time, the years are passing by. Now that child that was a baby is now a teenager and doesn't even want to spend time with them now because they don't really know their father or their mother. And then the parent is sad because, wow, my child doesn't even want to be with me. Well, why? They don't know you. That's why, honestly, you don't want to let these years, you don't get them back. Oh, I'm just going to 1 John 1:9 it. I'm just going to 1 John 1:9 it. You know what that means, right? 1 John 1:9 says, if we confess our sin, he is faithful and just to forgive us and to cleanse us of all unrighteousness. I'm just going to, 1 John 1, I'm just going to ask for forgiveness and then everything's going to be good. Oh, yeah? The scars will remain. The years you'll never get back. And some of the things, yeah, God forgives, but man doesn't forgive so easily. You know, whatever kind of legal issues, you're still going to have to take care of that. Financial issues, physical issues, that's still going to take time to work off. Now, God's grace is sufficient, but we should be wise enough to know that it's far better to live a life of freedom than bondage. And these kings were not. So the first point we see is the dynasty of Jehu. Now, God promised Jehu, and God is always true to his word. In 2 Kings chapter 10, verse 30, he says this, the Lord said unto Jehu, because thou hast done well in executing that which is right, he was obedient. Now, he didn't do it with a good heart, but he still did what God told him to do. Thou hast done well in executing that which is right in mine eyes, and hast done unto the house of Ahab according to all that was in mine heart. Thy children of the fourth generation shall sit on the throne of Israel. So he said, your descendants of the fourth generation will sit on the throne. So now we see his son. That's the king we're talking about right now. In the 23rd year of Joash, the son of Ahaziah, king of Judah, Jehoahaz, that's what we're talking about. Jehoahaz, the son of Jehu, began to reign. That's his son. But he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. And so did Jehu. So did Jehu. Sometimes we don't realize, but the things that we do, our children are going to do. They watch us. And what we do speaks to them a lot louder than what we tell them to do. The things that we do, they watch us. We're going to tell them, you need to go to church, and they watch us not go to church. They watch us skip church for things like sports and just extracurricular activities, and they take note of that. So now when we want them to go to church, they're going to be like, why? You didn't think it was important. Why should I? And they may not even say that, but they're watching. When we have certain habits, they're watching. And sometimes, even though we tell them not to do what I do, they're going to do what they see normally rather than what is said. We've got to be good examples. And that's what's happening here. We see that these kings just kept repeating what their parents did. So his father Jehu also continued in the idolatry of Jeroboam, and his son does the same thing. He follows in the footsteps of both Jeroboam and his father Jehu. The anger of the Lord was kindled. It made the Lord upset. People have this demented idea of God that he's this old man in the sky or up in the heavens on a rocking chair, just smiling down upon his creation and just saying, it's all good. Don't worry. No. He is a holy and righteous God that gets angry and he gets grieved. He's a loving God, but sin angers him because he knows how hurtful it can be to us. It's just like a parent, you see your children going down the wrong path, and if there's certain things that they're involved with or certain people that they shouldn't be hanging around or certain activities they shouldn't be a part of, it angers you when they get involved with those because it's going to hurt. That's how it is with God, except he knows way more he's infinitely more knowledgeable than we are. So that much more he gets angry. The anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he delivered them into the hand of Hazael, king of Syria, and into the hand of Ben-Hadad, the son of Hazael, all their days. So they're now in bondage, and when they're in bondage, they don't like it. So what is the king going to do? He is going to seek the Lord. He's in bondage, so he's going to seek the Lord. Why is it that people will seek out false gods, but when they get in trouble, when they're in a serious predicament, they call out to the true God? Isn't it that because they know that the true God, Jehovah God, is the only God that could really help? Why don't they call out to the false God that they're giving their allegiance to all this time? No, he's only good, this false God, when you're not wanting anyone to tell you what to do. When you're wanting to do your own thing, then it's convenient to have a false God that won't tell you You need to stop doing that. You shouldn't do this. It's like there's a story where this family they were an idolatrous family, and they had these idols. There was this tall figurine, this tall idol, and then there was this short, like kind of fat idol. And so when the parents left, then the children were playing and accidentally knocked over the one of the idols, the short idol, and it fell over and broke, got all smashed. So then they put it back up. And then when the parents came home, they said, "What did you guys do?" It wasn't us. That was that taller one. He was mad at that one, and he smashed him. Look at his face. You can tell, because he's going to do this. And the parent says, that idol can't do that. He can't do anything. And then the children were like, well, then why do we worship it? But the parents knew that idol could not have smashed that one. The children had to have done it. The children are, why not? We worship it. It can't do that. Why do we worship that if we can't even smash that little idol? They know it's not real, right? I tell people this too. When you're in a serious predicament, take note of the people you call. Take notice of the people you call. Because the people that you call during those times, that's your true friend. That is the people that care about you. So you should spend your time with them. But what happened? They'll spend time with all kinds of other people, and when they're in trouble, those people aren't around. It is so odd. But that's how we can be. That's how bondage works. It's just something about it. We want to be bound up. Like we have this dog sort of kind of. And, and the dogs, unfortunately, they'll get away. And if they do, they can get run over because our house is by a road that's people drive real fast. So this dog is on a leash. Sometimes this dog will go around a tree. When it goes around a tree, its leash will become this short. It's stuck. And so we'll get it, free it from the tree, and it'll do it again. I'm thinking, why you do that? Why do you keep going around the tree? It's not very smart. But sometimes we do the same thing. We do the same thing, and we end up in bondage every time, and yet we'll do it again. And we'll do it again. Do it again. And we'll do it again. So that's what's happening here. So he wanted deliverance. What does he do? He prays to the Lord. He seeks the Lord. And the Lord, in his infinite grace and mercy, delivers the nation. Even though God knows that this king's heart was not sincere. God knows our heart. But he still, because he wants the nation to be free, he loves his people. He loves Israel. So Jehoahaz besought the Lord, and the Lord hearkened unto him, for he saw the oppression of Israel, because the king of Syria oppressed them. And the Lord gave Israel a savior. Of course, this is a type or picture of Jesus, who is the ultimate savior or deliverer. And just think about it, as wicked and sinful as humanity is, God, knowing in advance what people would do, still created us, knowing what it was going to cost him. And so here the nation of Israel cries out for deliverance. God, knowing that they're going to go right back into the same bondage that he delivers them from, he still gives them a savior. He raises up a deliverer. We don't know who the deliverer is here. It doesn't say. And the Lord gave Israel a savior, so they went out from under the hand of the Syrians, and the children of Israel dwelt in their tents as before time. So this is kind of like in the time period of the judges. So they're raised up. They have a military leader that God uses to raise them up, and they are delivered. And so now they are free as they were before. So what do? instead of embracing freedom, they embrace bondage. They do the same thing that they did before that got them in the bondage. They did it again. So we see the dynasty of Jehu, then we see the deliverance of Israel, verse 4 and 5. Now we see the deterioration of Israel. And the reason the nation deteriorated is because they continued to do the same thing over and over and over and over again. And I guess they were expecting a different result. But same result, bondage. Verse 6, nevertheless, they departed not from the sins of the house of Jeroboam, who made Israel sin, but walked therein. And there remained the grove also in Samaria. So even though the Lord delivered them, there was no lasting change. They went right back to doing what they were doing, and they worshiped in the grove. The grove were heathen areas of worship. It's kind of like you had the high places, which was how the heathens worship. They would go into a high area overlooking everywhere, and that's where they would worship. And also the grove was kind of like a dark place, as men love darkness rather than light because their deeds are evil. So we see the deterioration of the nation. You can see that in our own nation. You see where we are at as a nation. That's because as a nation we have embraced the bondage as a whole. Verse 7. Neither did he leave of the people to Jehoahaz but 50 horsemen and 10 chariots. Imagine their military, only 10 chariots left. They were deteriorating. They were in bondage because they continued to seek out the false gods. They continued to be idolatrous, and they continued to be immoral. And so the nation deteriorated. They had 50 horsemen, 10 chariots, 10,000 footmen, for the king of Syria had destroyed them and made them like the dust by threshing. And so that was the result. They ended up seeking out the false gods that could not help them. And when they sought out the false gods, then God says, okay, well, you want to go that route? Go that route. And in doing that, they ended up being defeated and being in bondage to their enemies. Verse 8, now the rest of the acts of Jehoahaz and all that he did and his might, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? And Jehoahaz slept with his fathers, and they buried him in Samaria. And Joash his son reigned in his stead. In the 37th year of Joash, king of Judah, began Jehoash, the son of Jehoahaz, to reign over Israel in Samaria, and reigned 16 years. So now you're going to have a king by the name of Joash, who's reigning in Samaria, at the same time that there's another king named Joash that's reigning in Judah. So you had these kings with the same name that reigned at the same time. So it's confusing. So then now the king in the north is going to be known as, from the rest of this chapter, he's not going to be known as Joash, but Jehoash. But it's the same guy. So his name is Joash, and also it is Jehoash, because otherwise it'd be even more confusing. That's why when you're reading it, you're thinking, wait, I thought he was a king in the north, but it says the king of Judah, because he had the same name. And it was a popular name, I guess. And so you had a king in the south in Judah named Joash, and a king in the north named Joash. But you could also call him Jehoash. He is the son of Jehoahaz, to reign over Israel in Samaria, and reigned 16 years. Of course, this is Jehu's grandson. And he also did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. He departed not from all the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin, but he walked therein. And the rest of the acts of Joash, and all that he did, and his might wherewith he fought against Amaziah, Now, that story of him fighting against Amaziah, that's going to be in chapter 14. We'll read about it then. King of Judah. Are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? So remember, the book of Chronicles, it chronicles only the kings of what? Of Judah. So now it says that all what happened with this king, they're written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. We don't have that. It's lost. So it's gone. So all these kings, I guess because they're wicked, it's not preserved. So all that they did is just history is gone. We don't have the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. We only have the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah. And Joash slept with his fathers, and Jeroboam sat upon his throne, and Joash was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel. So he obviously named his son Jeroboam, after the original Jeroboam that caused Israel to sin. It's like if there's some wicked person and you name your son after that person. That's like a slap in the face to God. But that's what he did. And Jeroboam sat upon his throne, and Joash was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel. Now it goes back when he was still alive, and it talks about the death of Elisha. So far you have the dynasty of Jehu, the deliverance of Israel, the deterioration of the nation. Now you have the death of Elisha. You remember when Elijah, well, he didn't really die, right? He was caught up into a chariot and was taken up into the heaven. So you think maybe that the same is going to happen for Elisha, right? But no. He just dies a regular natural death. And he was sick. He got sick and died. And he healed people. He even raised people from the dead. But he's going to die. Now Elisha was fallen sick of his sickness, whereof he died. And Joash, the king of Israel, so obviously this is going back in time, because I already talked about his death. And Joash, the king of Israel, came down unto him and wept over his face, and said, O my father, the chariot of Israel, and the horsemen thereof. That was the same thing that was said when Elijah went up, right? And it is a saying that they would say, and it meant something like, what are we going to do now that you're gone, now that you're leaving? Something like that. That was a saying. So here's this king who was wicked, but he still respected Elisha. But he didn't respect Elisha's God. And there are people like that. They will respect Christians that take a stand for what they believe, but they don't respect the Christian's God. So he says this. And then it goes into a story of what happened between Elisha and this king, Joash. Verse 15. So this is the denial of freedom. They embraced bondage. They just didn't really want it. And Elisha said unto him, take bow and arrows. And he took unto him bow and arrow. And he said to the king of Israel, put thine hand upon the bow. And he put his hand upon it. And Elisha put his hands upon the king's hand. And he said, open the window eastward. So eastward was toward Syria, and specifically toward Aphek, the most strategic site between Damascus and Samaria. Aphek was the city where Ahab had defeated the Syrians years earlier. So he said, open the window eastward and shoot the arrow out that window. Put the hand upon the bow, put it, and he put his hand upon it. Elisha put his hands upon the king's hands, and he said, open the window eastward, and he opened it. Then Elisha said, shoot, and he shot. And he said, the arrow of the Lord's deliverance, and the arrow of deliverance from Syria. So a lot of times when a nation was going to go to war, they would, as a symbol of going to war, they would take an arrow and they'd point it at the enemy and they would shoot the arrow, or they'd throw a spear. And that would signify that they're going to war with that nation. And this is beginning their act of aggression towards this people. So Elisha is telling him to do that. I mean, this is a nation that is oppressing you. But God is good. God desires for you to be free. So open the window and shoot the arrow out of the eastern of the window pointing towards the east. And of course, we know that the east is very significant. In fact, when you look at the temple from the Mount of Olives, you'll see the eastern gate, And that's the gate where Jesus is going to enter. He's going to enter into the eastern gate, and it's called the beautiful gate, the eastern gate. And so it's always significant towards the east, symbolizing freedom, where freedom is going to come from. He said, open the window eastward and shoot the arrow. He shot the arrow of the Lord's deliverance, and the arrow of the deliverance from Syria. For thou shalt smite the Syrians in Aphek till thou have consumed them. He said, that's what the Lord has for you. But you got to want it. Like the Lord wants us all to be free. But you got to want it. You got to want it. There is an effort. In other words, if someone wants to be bound, the Lord is going to let them. If you want to live in bondage all your life, you don't have to, because the Lord has already freed us. But if people keep putting the handcuffs back on or keep jumping behind the bars or whatever, then that's how their life's going to be. Or they keep embracing the things that binds them. The arrow of the Lord's deliverance, and the arrow of deliverance from Syria. For thou shalt smite the Syrians, those that were oppressing the nation. And then in verse 18, and he said, take the arrows. And he took them. And he said unto the king of Israel, smite upon the ground. And he smote thrice and stayed. Now it's understood that they're talking of a language or traditions that were customary to them. And obviously there was some significance of the smiting of the ground. When Elisha told him to smite the arrows on the ground, that he wanted him to hit the ground with these arrows, signifying that I want deliverance. That this nation has kept us into bondage all these years. So there ought to be more of a passion. So he said, take those arrows and smite them on the ground. And I guess what he did was he just kind of went like this on the ground. And then Elisha just, for real. That's all you got. He was upset. Because this king had no passion. He didn't really want to be free. He wasn't willing to do anything about the situation that he was in. So he just goes like this. And you know what? That right there describes Christianity in our country nowadays. No passion. You ever see there was this I think it was a college. I think it wasn't even a playoff game or a championship game or anything. It was just a regular season game. And then they started singing their song or whatever. And I mean, these guys are jumping around like maniacs. For a regular season football game, when they're in a college, it's not even a high-ranking football college. And they're just like dancing and yelling and screaming and jumping around with so much passion. And then you see Christians with no passion, no energy. And that's kind of how he does it. He just kind of goes like, and Elisha's like, for real. And that's kind of what the text, how it reads. He said, take the arrows, and he took them, and he said unto the king of Israel, smite upon the ground, and he smote thrice and stayed. And the man of God was wroth with him, and said, thou shouldest have smitten 5 or 6 times. Then hadst thou smitten Syria till thou hadst consumed it. Whereas now thou shalt smite Syria but thrice. That's all you got. That's all you're going to get. You don't have any energy. You don't really care. Well, then that's how your life's going to be. It's going to be a half-hearted Christianity where you're going to die in the wilderness. You'll never make it to the promised land. You're not going to live in victory. You're going to be your whole life in the cycle of bondage. He said, that's what you want? That's what you got. You're just going to go like this? That's it? And that's what Christianity is like today. Trust me, I've been pastoring for 20-something years. It's just a half-hearted for the most part. Oh, we got to go to church. Oh, we got to read our Bible. We got to study the Bible. It's only God's eternal holy word. Oh, we got prayer meeting. Oh, what time is this finished? How long the pastor preach? Seems like he's preaching longer and longer every time. I don't know what's his problem. I mean, this is other churches, not this church, okay? That's how they say it, not here. When I go around and look, that's what I say. No, but sometimes we can have so much passion for so many other things. But it's like, honestly, we give ourselves away. Sometimes we have no heart for God or not much. We got just, that's it. And then we wonder why our Christian life is the way it is. Why is God going to do much for us when we don't even want him to do it? That's what he's saying. He goes, do you even want to be freed? And you know what? I don't think he really did. Because he's probably thinking, what does that mean? Total freedom. Does that mean we don't get to worship the false god? Does that mean I cannot fornicate anymore? Does that mean I can't drink alcohol anymore? What does it mean to be free? I don't know if I want that. And sometimes, you know what it is? As the Bible says, a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. Sometimes the truth is, we're not sure if we really want to be sold out. We just want, I want a family. I want somewhat of a Christian home, but I don't want to be too serious. I don't want to be too fanatical. I just want to be kind of like, like someone would say, I just want to be a social drinker. I don't want to be like someone who's a gutter drunk, but I don't want to be totally sober. I just want to be able to drink every now and then and just kind of like half in, half out. It doesn't work. You're either going to be all the way in or you're not in at all. How do you halfway swim? I mean, you can put your feet in the water. You could test the water and see the temperature of the water, but you can't swim unless you jump in. You're not going to know what it's like to serve the Lord until you're all the way serving him. It's just not going to work. And then you're gonna have a wrong impression. I just don't know about this Christian. And you know what? When someone's got it, it's obvious. It's obvious. And you know what? People don't fool anybody because people talk. Your testimony is giving you away. And there are some people that are just frauds. They're just frauds. They're not fooling God. They're not fooling you. They're not fooling your children. You're not fooling your spouse. You're not fooling your neighbor. Of course, you're definitely not fooling God. And you're not even fooling yourself. We're either going to be real or not. And if you're not real, let's think about the book of Revelation. God says, he says, I'd rather, if you either could be hot, cold, or hot. But if you're lukewarm, I spew thee out of my mouth because it sickens the Lord. Because it doesn't work. You're never going to really understand the ways of the Lord if we're going to just be a half-hearted Christian. And you know what? Really, honestly, if you ran a business, you wouldn't want your employees to be half-hearted. You'd want them to be gung-ho for your business. And that's the way the Lord is. We're all that way. If we're a coach, we don't want, when we say, okay, we're gonna run some laps. We don't want people being like this. We want them, okay, let's run. You want some enthusiasm, right? When you're on the job and you're a boss, okay, we're gonna build the house. My hammer. Or you want the house built, right? You don't want that. You want some energy. You want some passion. And this king, I think that's what he did. He just went, you happy? Is that enough, Elisha? Did I do it okay? He's like, you know what? Let me just die already. Just leave me in peace so I can just die. Right after that, Elisha dies, right? He's like, oh man, I'd rather just go to heaven and see this. No passion, no energy for the most important thing. He's a king. He could lead the nation into freedom. There's a lot of people counting on him. Just like there's a lot of people counting on me, right? There's a lot of people counting on you. Some people you don't haven't even met yet. And if we're going to just be wishy-washy, kind of like lackadaisical, I'm sure it's to be that way is just miserable. How come we got to go to church every time on Wednesday? If we had no one telling us, would we even be here? If there was no reason, no rule, no other person, no accountability, would you even be here? Or would we just have what? A handful. We got to have passion. Our heart's got to be in it. And when you're in it, everything goes with you. And that's why I think Elisha got upset. Because the king, he just took the arrows and he just went like that. And that was it. So you know what? They had 3 victories and they went right back into bondage. Verse 18. Or verse 19. And the man of God was wroth with him and said, thou shouldst have smitten 5 or 6 times. Then he wanted him to keep going and him say, stop, enough. You broke all arrows already. No, it wasn't like that though. Then thou hast smitten Syria till thou hast consumed it. Whereas now thou shalt smite Syria but thrice. Verse 20. And Elisha died right after that. And they buried him, and the bands of the Moabites invaded the land at the coming in of the year. Well, I mean, if you don't got any passion in your king, right? By the way, if you're a leader, people are going to only do what you do for the most part. If you're a half-hearted person, they're going to be half-hearted. That's just a fact. If I'm half-hearted, my kids are going to be half-hearted. That's just a fact. People usually do what the leader does. And the king is half-hearted. So where's the nation going? And then what happens here? The Moabites invade the land. There's nobody to protect them, to protect the people. Then we see the departure from death. This is very interesting. Verse 21. It came to pass, as they were burying a man, the Moabite, that behold, they spied a band of men, and they cast the man into the sepulchre of Elisha. And when the man was let down and touched the bones of Elisha, because see, when they bury people, they put them in like a cave, and then they put the rocks around it. So when they put him in there, when they were going to bury this, and I guess they say, well, here's the sepulcher, let's put him in there. And it was the sepulcher of Elisha. When the person that was dead touched the bones of Elisha, it said he revived and stood up on his feet. He came back to life. And then this, of course, was the last miracle that Elisha did, which gave him the twice as many miracles as that Elijah did. And then it says in verse 22, but Hazael, king of Syria, oppressed Israel all the days of Jehoahaz. And the Lord was gracious unto them and had compassion on them and had respect unto them because of his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and would not destroy them. Thank the Lord for the new covenant. That no matter what, if you're saved, you're on your way to heaven. No matter what, if you're saved, you're on your way to heaven. God honors the covenant that he made. So he had respect unto them because of his covenant, and only because of that, the covenant that he made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and would not destroy them, neither cast he them from his presence as yet. So Hazael, king of Syria, died, and Ben-Hadad his son reigned in his stead. And Jehoash, the son of Jehoahaz, took again out of the hand of Ben-Hadad, the son of Hazael, the cities which he had taken out of the hand of Jehoahaz his father by war. 3 times did Joash beat him, and recovered the cities of Israel because of the 3 hits. But man, if he would have just went all out, they would have had total deliverance and not just 3. So the question is, do we really want freedom in our life? Or do we just want, I just want, to have a basic life. I don't want to be so committed. You'd be surprised when we get to heaven how our life could have been had we just had the faith to be all in, to be totally committed to God, to be on fire for God. What our life could be. When Jesus died on the cross for our sins, that's what he wanted. He gave us total deliverance. He gave us total victory, 100% victory. Jesus did not do what he did half-heartedly. He embraced it, what he did. He went 100% for us so that we could have a life of freedom. And so what he desires for us, we can only have if we also desire that for ourselves. Now, we're saved no matter what. We're going to heaven no matter what. But what kind of life do we live on this earth is going to be determined by the kind of faith that we have in Jesus Christ. Without faith, it is impossible to please Him. But sometimes we got to ask ourselves, do I really want freedom? What is that? What would that look like? Is that really what I want? But sometimes I think that's, for the most part, a lot of people don't really want it. They don't really want it. When they really ask themselves serious questions, they think, I don't know if I really want to live without doing that. It's part of who I am. And then they'll just live their life, and it'll be a sad representation of the Christian. And that's kind of how it is in the book of 2 Kings. It's just one sad story after the next as we study the king.
You have been listening to our Truth to Live By podcast, a ministry of Windward Baptist Church. This podcast is supported by the gifts and donations of its listeners. You can make a secure donation through our website at windwardbaptist.org.